In this video, I'm going to show you how to use custom images in the new Windows Virtual Desktop service. Hello everyone, this is another video in a series I'm doing on Windows Virtual Desktop. In this video, I'm going to go over creating a custom multi-user Windows 10 image and using it as a template for Windows Virtual Desktop deployments. Before that, please take a minute to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of new videos. And to show my appreciation for subscribing, here's a picture of an adorable Cavapoo. Let's move on. There are a couple ways to create images with Windows Virtual Desktop. The process falls under two basic categories: a clean image managed by some type of software deployment service, or a pre-created image. The first method would be to deploy a standard image like I've done in the last two videos, and then use a service like SCCM, Chef, Puppet, or DSC to push software and settings to the OS. For Windows Virtual Desktop, this would include creating a deployment and pushing software to the workstation once they're deployed. This is not much different from a standard workstation deployment and not what this video is going to cover. I'm going to cover the process of creating a pre-configured custom image to use as the basis of deployments. This could be done by creating an image locally on Hyper-V and prep it for Azure. Microsoft has some documentation on how to do just this. Here's one on converting the virtual disk to Hyper-V version 1 and resizing it. Here's information on installing Office 365. Be sure to follow the steps for the multi-user version. This is not the click-to-run version. This is the traditional MSI install. And here's information on uploading the image to Azure storage. Or you could do it the easy way and the way I'm going to do it in this demonstration. As I was hunting for a multi-user Windows 10 image and reviewing the process of deploying Office in a multi-user environment, I checked what was available on the Azure market. I was happy to find a multi-user version of Windows 10 with Office 365 pre-installed. This is a great time saver. It's the exact multi-user version needed with all the required Azure settings and Office installed and ready to go. With that as a starting point, here are the steps I'm going to take to create the custom image. First, I'm going to deploy the Windows 10 multi-user with O365 preview image on an Azure VM with non-managed disks, although I think managed would work just fine for this as well. Once that's deployed, I'll log in and add any additional software and make any other customizations needed, such as modifying the start menu. With the image ready, I'll run Sysprep and shut down the OS. The OS disk from the template VM is then used as the base for deploying Windows Virtual Desktop. Keep in mind that my goal is not to do a deep dive on configuring custom images, but to show how you can use a custom image in a Windows Virtual Desktop deployment. I'm going to take some steps to customize the image, but not go into too much detail on that. So enough of me yammering on. Let's get into the demo. Buckle up everyone, it's time for demos. So this demo, I'm going to go over four things. First, I'm going to deploy a Windows 10 1809 template with Office 365 already installed. Then I'm going to customize that template by adding some software and making changes to the start menu. After that, I'm going to sysprep the template image and to get it ready for deployment, and then I'm going to use that as the base to deploy Windows Virtual Desktop. So as I stated before, you could get yourself a copy of Windows 10 Enterprise 1809 multi-user and then go through all the steps of installing Office 365, but that has to be the version that can run in a multi-user environment. Then you would need to prep that OS on a Windows Hyper-V server version 1 and do all the steps outlined in the documentation to get it ready for Azure. Or you could go in and just do it in Azure. I'm going to search for Windows 10. And here we go. It's Microsoft Windows 10 plus Office 365 Pro Plus. So I'm going to click on this version. And here you can see it just says Microsoft Windows 10 Office 365 Pro Plus. The last time I did this, there's some language in here that indicated it was the multi-user version. If I click on Create, we can see here it's showing the image is the Virtual Desktop Preview 1809 with the Office Pro Plus. So this is the one we need. Now I'm going to leave that as pay-as-you-go. I'll create a new resource group. And I'll just name this template. And I'll add that to central. That's my preferred region. I'm not going to have any infrastructure redundancy. You can change size as you see fit. I like using the M series. They're a little bit less expensive. But I will note, if you're planning on adding software, don't skimp too much on this. That can lead to a lot of waiting. So add your username and password. This is the same as deploying any other virtual machine in Azure. You can see licenses all grayed out. You do need the Windows 365 license. I think it's an E3 or E5 cal. Definitely consult your licensing expert. I'm just going to use a standard hard drive. And under Advanced, I'm going to select the option for not to use managed disks. There's lots of good reasons why to use managed disks, but for this, I don't want to pay for this machine just in the off state. There's no real reason to have managed disk for this. So I'm going to use unmanaged, and that way I've got a storage account that I can reference when I actually do the deployment. Here I'm going to add it to an existing VNet that I have. I don't need a public IP. Well, I guess. There we go. No accelerated networking, pretty much basic. All I'm doing is logging in and installing some software on this, so I don't need a whole lot. We'll just skim by that. I should do tags, but I'm not going to. And review and create. So validation passed, so now you just hit create and let it deploy and then log in once it's done. All right, through the miracle of editing, I jumped ahead a little bit. I already had this deployed. And I've got some applications on here. I've got Chrome, I've got Notepad++. I installed Visual Studio Code, and that's the system version, not the user version. System will be available for all users. Obviously, if this is multi-user desktop, that's what you want. All I did here, I wanted to give some examples of just random applications that somebody might use in a real environment. So in the Start menu, one thing I'm going to do is just delete this or unpin it, because I don't want people to see the store. Let's see if I can just add these from here. Pin to start. There we go. Now we can move these around. Here it is, all finished. I don't intend this to be a deep dive into customizing start menus and application deployments. I just want to give an example of how somebody might customize, make some customization changes on the template that they're going to use to deploy within Windows Virtual Desktop. Now that I have that start menu set up the way I want it, the next thing I'm going to do is run PowerShell. I'm going to go to the desktop directory. I'm going to export the start layout with the export start layout command. Okay, so that puts it on the desktop. Now I'm going to import it, and by importing it, it's going to set it as the default for every new profile. There's a whole art and science behind this as far as setting mandatory start menu layouts versus default and how they're applied. You can do this through GPOs and a whole bunch of stuff, but for this, I'm just going to keep it simple. And that's all there is to it. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go into File Explorer, because one of the problems that I've seen is when a user logs in, they are not going to have the option to shut down. They'll just have disconnect. They can't restart because they're not going to be local admins, so they don't have that right. The only thing they can do is disconnect, and you really don't want people disconnecting in a terminal session because the session will just kind of hang out there eating up resources. So if they're done, you want to encourage them to actually log off. So what I'm going to do is go, okay, here's shutdown.exe under C Windows System 32, and I'm going to create a shortcut. And I'll just cut it. We're going to go to C users, public, desktop. There it is. You can see the shortcuts that are on the desktop are already there. Any shortcut in this folder will be available to all users because it's public. I'm going to paste it. And then we're going to go into the properties. And what I'm going to do is add shutdown-L. So the target will be the -L, which means log off. And I'm going to change icon to this one. You can set it for whatever you want. We have to name this log off. Okay, now the users have a log off button on their desktop, and let's double click that, and it worked. And I'm back. So now that that's done, we have our image ready to go. The desktop's looking the way I want it. I've got the start menu, which if everything goes well is going to be replicated for every new user that logs into this image. The next step is to run Sysprep. So what Sysprep does is it removes unique settings within the OS and kind of turns it back into like an out-of-box experience, like if you just had installed this fresh. But we're leaving some of these remnants behind that we made modifications to. So what we're going to do is run Sysprep. So what we're going to do is go into Explorer and go to C, Windows, System 32, Sysprep. And we'll run this. Now we've got a couple options here. So the system cleanup action, we're going to leave it at out-of-box experience. And then we're going to generalize. Generalize is what's going to strip away all those unique IDs and have them recreated the next time it restarts. We're going to set this to shut down. So when it's done, it's just going to shut down. And after it shuts down, I won't turn this back on because the next time we turn this on, it's going to run through a setup process that's going to ask for a name, local admin account, passwords, all that stuff, just like we did the first time. We don't want that on the template. We're going to use that image or that state for the actual deployment. So we're just going to shut it down. The only time I'll turn this back on is if I want to make adjustments to the base image and use that for another deployment. So let's say I wanted to add a couple pieces of software. I could turn this back on, add it, make my changes, run this Sysprep again with the generalize, and use that updated version as a new template for another deployment. And one thing to note, because after this shuts down, I'm just going to leave this template sit. I'm not going to reference it again. Make sure you go into the VM settings in Azure and deallocate the VM, because just by shutting down here, you're still paying for it. But if you go into Azure, deallocate this VM, then you're not paying for it anymore. So I'll hit OK, and that's just going to take a couple seconds to run, and it will shut down. Okay, there we go. It's shut down. That took a little bit longer than I wanted. But anyway, here I'm going to hit stop. Remember I said we have to hit stop. Otherwise, we're paying for it. Now, what I'm going to do is go into disks. And here it is. I'm going to click to copy. So we have the virtual hard drive URI. Now, what I'm going to do, I've got that stored local. I'm going to go in and do a new Windows virtual desktop deployment. And provision a host pool. So I'm going to select pooled. It's going to ask for default users, and I have to go back and copy that because I've got multiple users this time. So I'm just going to paste that URL into a different window, and then I'll come up and we'll paste those users in. Resource group, I'm going to create a new one. We'll call this something clever. We'll keep it in Central US. And I'm going to do a total of 5. And I'll do a B2S. See, I want to do 2 this time. There. So if I change it to 10, it'll give me the option for 2. Okay, so now I've got the option of blob storage or managed image. I'm going to select blob and the image URI. That is that URL that I copied from the storage account. I'll keep it a standard disk, and the UPN to join the domain, I'll add that. I'm going to specify the domain in OU. I've heard a lot of people have problems with this, so some advice I'd have is make sure that the VNet you're adding these to can connect to your domain controller for whatever domain you're entering. Be sure to change this from Contoso to your actual domain. And if you still have problems, deploy a single server into connected to that same VNet and subnet that you're using for deploying Windows Virtual Desktop, and try adding it to the domain with the same account that you're using, just to make sure everything's set up, because if that doesn't work, then this definitely won't work. I won't use managed disks. I think this is new since the last time I did a video. So I'm selecting VNets and subnets I already have in place. And what's this saying? Okay, so I can't use that because it's already taken. Storage account names have to be globally unique. Here we've got the tenant group, and then we've got the tenant name, and I'm going to add a UPN. I'm not using a service principal. I'll go over that in another video. And there's all the details. It's going to validate, and once it's passed, I'm going to click OK and create. All right, I'm going to pause here. This should take about 20-30 minutes to deploy, and once it's done, we'll come back and try logging in and see if those new desktop settings held. And I'm back. That took a little bit longer than expected, and full disclosure, it actually failed the first time. I had to rerun the same deployment, but this time with managed disks instead of using the standard or unmanaged disks, and it went through okay. So if you're wondering why in the demo before I showed setting up unmanaged disks and now you're seeing managed, that's why. So I'll dig into that issue later, but for now let's move on. I've got 3 windows here. We'll start with this one. So I logged into the workstation with one of the 3 accounts, and as you can see, I've got my icons here, a little bit different order, but that's okay. And you can see I've got the log off, and also if I go into my start, I do have the icons in the start menu. There could be a little bit of work done to improve the layout, but for now that just shows that I am using the same image. So let's go in here and sign on with the other 2 accounts. So that's user 2, and here I'm going to log in with user 3. I've got 3 accounts now logged in to Windows Virtual Desktop into the RD website. I'm using the web client for this one, and I'm actually using each window as an in-private session so I can log in 3 times with different accounts. So I'm going to click here and we'll log in to the actual Windows Virtual Desktop. As before, I'm first logging in with the Azure AD account, and then when I try to log into the workstation, I'm actually using Active Directory authentication for that second login. Although in this case, the username and password is the same because I'm using AD Sync or AD Connect. And I'll log in with the 3rd user. So here's the 2nd user. And you can see it's the same thing. I've got the same icons and the same start menu. And the 3rd should be the same way. Give it a second to log in. Same menu, or same icons on the desktop, and the same start menu. So there's consistency in how users are logging in and viewing the desktops. The reason I did 3 users is because I only deployed 2 virtual machines. So you can see here's the 0, or the first one, and 1, the second one. In order to get 3 users to log into 2 Windows 10 virtual machines, I had to use the image with the multi-user experience. And just to show that, I'm going to go over here, and I've got some new RDS commands. For PowerShell, I did connect already to my tenant. And if you don't have these commands, you can download them. I gave the link in the last video. So the first thing I'm going to do is run this command that gets all the session hosts. So here you can see I have 2. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to I've got a little bit of a better format on this. So here we can see the name of the service host, and then it's allowing sessions and the number of sessions each and its status. One of the management tasks I had to frequently do in an RDS environment was identify who's logged into what server. And sometimes I had to take that server out of the pool or not allow new connections, so I could bleed off the existing connections and maybe do maintenance on it, shut it down, restart it, whatever. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep working through. I have user sessions here, so we can see what users are actually logged in. And again, I just changed the format a little bit, modifying the output. So I can see we've got 3 session hosts. So we have 2 users, and we have test user 2 and 3 are on 0, whereas test user 1 is on -1. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to simulate bleeding off users. And what we're going to do is set the RDS session host to allow sessions false. So this is going to not allow any more sessions. But before I do that, I'm going to hop over to, let's see here, we're going to do this to virtual machine 0, so these bottom 2. So users 2 and 3, I'm first going to kick off, or actually log off. So I go here, I've got the log off button. Now if I run this get RDS user session command again, we can see we only have 1 user attached to session host -1. I'm going to run this command to disable new logins. And I'm just going to get the session host servers one more time. And here we can see 0, the first one on the list here, is not allowing any new sessions. So I'm going to come back here and just log in again as the same 02 and 03 user. I'll do user 3. So there we are. Now let's go back into VS Code, and I'm going to run this command again. And good. To be honest, I have not actually done this, so this is all the first time I'm doing it. I'm glad it worked as I expected. So we've got number of sessions on -0 is 0 and -1 is 3. So all 3 users are logged into that same server now. And again, we can see same desktop settings and the same start menu. And next I'm going to get RDS user session. And I can expect what that's going to tell us. Yep, all 3 users, user 1, user 2, user 3, are all on the same session host. I'm going to run this again and set it to true. So now I'm going to allow sessions on that session host. And let's view the session host one more time just to make sure that's set. There we go. Now this time I'm going to log out user 1. And log back in, and we should see it go to the other available server. Now, in this instance, I'm using the default breadth first load balancing type. If I had used depth first, if I had changed it from the default, we would have seen all the users go to the first session host until that max count or max limit is reached, and then the users would start going over to the other. The desktop is looking the same. But if I come over here and get the user sessions, we can see now user 1 is on CIRVM-0, while the other two are still on the -1 session host. That's all there is to this demo. So that is how you create a custom image, use that for a Windows virtual desktop deployment, and manage user sessions. Fun. Of course, all environments are different, and this process might not work for everyone. You may be required to deploy and manage all software from a service like SCCM. In reality, the steps to set up Windows 10 multi-user environments is not much different from configuring a session host in an RDS environment. The Windows 10 multi-user with Office pre-installed available in the Azure Marketplace is a great option for people testing the new service or as a starting point for production deployments once this product is GA. I hope you found this informative. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified when new videos come out. Thanks again.